Well, welcome to a special panel of today's Smart Construction Virtual Summit that is going to look at modular construction. Now, modular construction is one of the most important topics around when it comes to improving the way we deliver construction projects in the Middle East, because not only does it promise to improve quality and reduce waste and improve safety, it also has the potential to fundamentally change the relationships between different parties across project teams and in the construction industry, and bring together manufacturers into the construction at risk process, the contracting process, and sort of create new requirements for regulation. So it is a massive topic, and there is a lot to cover. Probably my overarching comment would be that this is not a particularly new topic, and one of the questions I have for the panelists is, how do we accelerate modular construction in the region? If you have questions for our panelists, you can use the on the right hand side, the Stages tab of your screen. Underneath it, there's a chat button, and you can send questions to the panelists using that tab. And I do encourage you to get involved. We have a great panel today, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But it is such an important topic, and it has such incredible potential to transform the construction industry. So your panelists today, Naji Atallah is the head of construction and manufacturing for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa emerging markets at Autodesk, the technology giant for computer-aided design. Riad Bsaibes is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Amana Investments, who are one of the leading proponents of modular construction in the region. Abdulmajid Karanouh is the International Director and Head of Interdisciplinary Design and Innovation at Drees and Sommer. And Nicholas Reynolds is the Construction Director at Amana. Amana is one of the giga projects, the Vision 2030 giga projects that are really set to transform Saudi Arabia and for the construction industry, create lots of opportunities for work. So welcome, gentlemen, to all four of you. Thank you so much for your time today. What I'd like to do first is just go round the panel for some keynote thoughts. I'll start with you, Naji. So prefabrication, modular construction, the industrialization of the construction process. Why is this important to Autodesk, and where are we with it? What is the state of play with modular construction?
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today. Today I take the view of an enabler. So at Autodesk, we make software for people who make things. And in the region here, we're really known for our footprint in the construction industry, but we're also very present in manufacturing and in media and entertainment. So I think I can also speak to the convergence of the different technologies where we work. And let me start from what you said at the beginning of modular not being new. And I can't agree more. We haven't been doing modular for years or for decades. It's actually a few centuries. And there's evidence of buildings that were made in parts and then shipped to settlements in the 17th century. So it's definitely a new topic, not a new topic. The big difference, or what we see today, is that modular there's a refreshed interest in modular because it's becoming more viable as part of the whole theme of industrialized construction. And viability or feasibility to me is not just a function of cost. Regardless of the debate whether modular is less or more expensive than traditional construction, I look at feasibility from a project's outcome scenario. In some cases, there are very tight timelines for projects. You mentioned the giga projects in Saudi, where there are definite timelines that the owners have to hit. Modular represents a potential solution there. There are other projects where there are environmental considerations as well, and modular can be a solution. So what I see differently is that adoption is actually accelerating. partly because of the urbanization that we see, and partly also because in some parts of the world, construction speed is actually slowing down. So I take here the example of Marriott, the giant hotel owner. They have a shortage of properties in the US, at least at the beginning of the pandemic. And to build a property now for Marriott, it takes them more time than it used to do so 30 years ago. So they had to experiment with newer construction methods or delivery methods, modular being the case in this instance. And for the past just under a decade, they transitioned from experimenting on low-rise to mid-rise buildings, and this seems to be a sweet spot for modular now. The single occupancy or the low occupancy low-rise buildings. Another reason I see for the increased adoption is around technology. For companies wanting to do modular, the major investment these days needs to be in data and in design, and getting the data right and getting the design right. So technology is no longer a bottleneck. It all starts with data that describes the components, how the components are made, how they fit together, how they build assemblies, and then modules. And our current generation of technology can easily handle those considerations. For the Marriott projects, for example, there's a custom utility that was built that looks at this data and puts them together. So we're talking now about standardization of parts that go together just like an advanced set of Lego.
So if I can just pick up on one of the points you made there near the beginning of your comments, Naji, what we're talking about here is the construction industry thinking more like a manufacturing process, sort of repetition and offsite prefabrication. You mentioned that you work across, the Autodesk, and you personally work across, manufacturing sector, construction sector. What would you say are the differences? What makes it so difficult for this to happen in one but not in the other side?
So if we look at a manufacturing line, it's a standard set of processes applied to a standard set of material, right? You get raw material at the beginning of that line, you get a finished product at the end of the line by applying a certain set of processes. And this standardization is currently what we lack in construction. So there's more design diversity, there's more end products that are required in construction projects than in manufacturing. This is why applying modular or applying the concepts of modular design are not as easy. Having said that, there is a sweet spot for projects where we're not going to ditch all the conventional construction techniques and replace them with modular, but where modular can complement, where we can have that repeatability, the current construction techniques or the more adopted construction techniques to deliver better project outcomes.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, if anyone has questions for Naji or any of the other panelists, you can use the Stages icon tab on the right-hand side of your screen and send your questions in. So please keep them coming. Thank you, Naji. Riad, I'll come to you. So Riad Bsaibes, you are the President and Chief Executive Officer of Amana Investments. Now, Amana Investments, you have Dubox in your portfolio, and you're famous in the region for really pushing modular models. But as Naji just said there, in construction, you've got bespoke architecture, because clients want iconic buildings. You've got unique ground conditions and site conditions on every project. So how can it work? What are your thoughts on the potential for modular and where we are today?
Good afternoon, good morning, Richard and everyone. Thank you for having us on this platform. I iterate what Naji said earlier. There are different horses for different courses. A modular or industrialized construction will not push out all of the traditional construction, absolutely not. But it has certain strengths and weaknesses. So the strong point, for example, of industrialized construction is the ability to have, provided you have the right elements in place, ability to have certainty in the schedule. because once you shift it to a manufacturing environment, you have a stronger control on the schedule. So that's one. You have better quality in the outcome, especially on the finishing. That's two. You have the ability to reduce wastage, and we've seen it through our platform, both DoBox and DoPod. There's 30% less wastage when you work in a factory environment than in a site environment. You also reduce your carbon footprint and your impact on the environment. So you work in a factory environment and minimize the impact at sites, and therefore reduce that environmental impact that you do in a construction site typically. So there's a number of advantages, and let alone that when it becomes manufacturing, then you can start putting a lot of tools of the fourth industrial revolution. You can put IoT into the process, Internet of Things. You can introduce Six Sigma and so on and so forth as a manufacturing play. So these are the advantages of the modular construction. The disadvantages of going modular are many as well. So one of them, for example, is in order to go to production or manufacturing, you have to have a full design. The design has to be 100% full. There's no way to have a variation order or a change in design or a change in scope. So as a result, you have to have the design and the specs and the material all agreed on by all stakeholders. Then you push a button and go to manufacturing, which pushes decision-making to front loads the decision-making by all stakeholders. So it puts pressure on, for example, the end user or the client to make decision on things such as the color of the paint or the finishing of the tiling, where in traditional construction, that's pushed later on in the process. So that's one weak point in offsite construction or industrialized construction, is that requirement to get everything early on agreed. Another disadvantage of it is also the inability to change or to accommodate halfway. So it's linked to the first one, the inability to change during the process. So it's really rigid. So that plays to it. The third one is the fact that when you have modular, at least volumetric modular, which is what we are focused on, and we believe that has the most impact to save versus the 2D modular or the pack and ship modular. The volumetric modular, there's an inherent disadvantage is that you're putting, once you're done, you're sending to site a box that sits on top of another box. So you're really doubling up on the structural elements. If it's in concrete, you're doubling up on the concrete. You have a floor, and then you have a ceiling on top of it. Versus
volumetric, that's pods, is it? What we would sometimes call pods?
Well, volumetric means it's sent in a 3D volume to site versus 2D. Okay. It could be a pod, for example, like a bathroom pod or kitchen pods, which is what we do through DoPods that we launched last year. And we do it in structural steel and light gauge steel, so it's a very light element. Or it could be in concrete, which is like the full room, and that's what we've been doing through DoBox over the last 10 years, roughly. It's a full room with everything in it that gets shipped to site. But it's really a volumetric modular volume versus the 2D like precast elements and so on. So they're different horses for different courses, I would say, and neither one will displace the other.
If I can just pick up on the point that you mentioned about completing the design earlier. So from my experience of covering the Middle East construction industry, one of the classic problems is starting, because real estate developers want to get their product to market quickly, they start the project at the earliest possible moment and the designs are often not complete. So if people have to complete designs earlier, that's inevitably going to delay the starting process of the construction, although maybe not the ending process. So does that follow Naji's point that some projects are not ideally suited, or some clients are not ideally suited? There's a kind of sweet spot. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, Richard, when we sign projects with DoBox, for example, we make it imperative with the client. We pre-agree on the duration of time needed to approve the material, the drawing, the specs, and so on. And as much as possible, try to cook it into the contract, because that really delays everything else. It's the bottleneck. And the reason modular, one of the reasons it's become more popular over the last few years is because computational power has allowed software such as the one from AutoCAD and other providers to really be able to crunch and provide you with a 3D model fairly quickly, so that you can do any clash detections and have a twin model that's across all the stakeholders, from the client all the way to the supplier.
Okay, thank you. And just one final question on the actual, in terms of volumetric modules. I presume that you are actually, whilst the pods are being assembled at one location, you're relying on several supply chains bringing in components from around the world. So there's quite a sophisticated logistics supply chain which is why you can't change the design, or it's difficult to change the design.
True, and we run in parallel. So at site, we're doing the site work, while in the factory, we're doing the actual building. And whatever time is lost or taken in the design period, that's made up for in the manufacturing, because you parallel process in the manufacturing. So if it's ground plus 3 floors, you're doing everything at the same time, and you don't have to finish the first floor before doing the second floor.
And if I can just, sorry to stay on you just for a moment, how did COVID affect that? So over the past 18 months, with all the sort of logistics disruption, was that a significant problem for you, or did it not really affect things?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it affected all of us and all construction regardless, because it affected the supply chain. So in one way, it affected us. The supply chain got delayed, but nevertheless, the design period was proceeding anyway. It's virtual, so it wasn't impacted that much by COVID. But the supply to the factory and to site got delayed. However, given that it's a manufacturing play, once you get the material to site, the site is controllable from a COVID point of view, because you have a limited number of people accessing the factory.
Yeah.
So you're able to provide that social distancing and those measures, those safety measures, much so than in a normal site.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Riad. Now, if anyone has questions for any of the panelists, Riad or any of the others, please send them in using the Stages tab on the right-hand side of your screen. I would like to come now to Abdulmajid Karanouh, who is the International Director and Head of Interdisciplinary Design and Innovation at Drees and Sommer. Hi, Abdulmajid. So you've heard the comments so far. I presume you probably agree with most of what you've heard, but what are your thoughts on where we are with modular construction and how we can accelerate its, or even should we accelerate its utilization?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to thank both Naji and Riad for listing all the, or let's just say, highlighting all the points that they did, because that makes now my life a lot easier. Yes, they're both absolutely right about the strength and the weaknesses and the opportunities, right, of modular design and construction. I think perhaps maybe to Riad's point about flexibility, that yes, in principle, you need to have the design well completed, at least to a certain degree, before you can actually order the material and start manufacturing. Because it's not that easy to make changes while things are being shipped, for example, right on site, as a simple example, or transported on site. With that being said, once as soon as we go into more or less quote unquote high tech, right, methods of construction, it's always good to draw lessons from industries that have done this, right, prior to the construction industry, or maybe they have done it more extensively and they're more sophisticated at doing it, like the automotive, the aerospace, marine industry, right, and so on. I'm just going to give a quick analogy between, let's just say, cars and buildings. The interesting thing about car design, or let's just say automotive design, is when you have the technology, right, to do this full simulation, which is fantastic. You see, the beauty of it is the retention of the technology knowledge, right, and the methods. And in that respect, say for example, today it's this is now 2021 model, all models that are going to be released. 2022 models are not going to be radically different, right, than 2021. And it only tends to be every 5 years, for example, cycle, or in some cases 10-year cycle, where you produce a new generation, right, of cars. So for example, we used to go for petrol driven cars, and now, for example, we have electrical. Now we have electric, or let's just say we went to gas. Then it was gas and electrical. Now it's just fully electrical. The point I'm trying to make is, because now we have the ability to simulate, right, design really well, we also have the ability to retain, right, the knowledge of how we design, how we engineer, and then how we construct it, right, quite well. So we have better capabilities of documenting, right, in addition to better capabilities of simulating. So in that respect, I would say modular becomes really powerful once we learn, in collaboration with the clients, with the design team, engineers, contractors, and so on. Once we learn how to adapt the designs that we have, as opposed to start from scratch every time. The issue that Riad has highlighted is always amplified, right, when you're always trying to start from scratch. But if you have an architect, an engineer, a client, a contractor that understand the concept of modular design, therefore then they will be able to sit down and say, okay, today I have a new residential building. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I have all this knowledge, right, that I can use, adapt in order to create this new project. If, however, you need to have to do something revolutionary, or very innovative, very new, then of course, fine, you go back to square one. But it doesn't have to be the case for every building, if that makes sense.
So on that point then, so if you complete project A, a building, say it's a 10-story building, and you've got your virtual twin with the modular units, presumably the data or the design, it belongs to somebody, and I'm guessing that somebody is the client, the owner of the building. Yeah. Are you saying that they should put that on a platform somewhere as an open source template that others can use? Or you just mean they keep it within themselves?
No, what I mean is the architect, the engineer, the designers, the cost consultant, all of these people, right? If they have taken proper part ownership of building this model, they have this information, and they will be able then to, take this information and adapt it. I'm not saying copy paste, right? Unless it's an identical building, and very few you have identical buildings. But you can adapt this information to a new building. And again, what I mean by adapting is you need to understand the original principle so that you can adapt it correctly. But if you're going to sit down with a design team that has never done modular design or construction before, they don't know how to use existing data and existing methods and be able to adapt. And you have to start the whole process from scratch with them. And this is always the challenge. To give you maybe another very, very quick example. For example, we used to have stick curtain walls in the past. Now we have unitized curtain walls, right? Everybody now understands the concept of unitized curtain wall. It wasn't the case maybe 30, 40 years ago. People had some problems understanding how unitized curtain walls work, what are their advantages and disadvantages. But now that people are well familiar with unitized curtain walls, they know how to adapt the system to different buildings, residential, offices, hospitality, healthcare, and so on. So in a similar way, modular design and construction, right? Once people become more familiar with it, they will understand advantages, disadvantages, their parameters, their limitations, and so on, and they will be able to adapt it better.
I can imagine, from what the three of you have said so far, for buildings like schools, hospitals, prisons, military barracks, where you've got relatively low-rise utilitarian buildings that don't necessarily need to look great, I can see modular being a fit. But not everyone wants that. You've still got, people want structures to look iconic, to look individual, site conditions are different. So would you say that there are some types of building that should just not even start going down the modular process, just, carry on the traditional way?
Cars and planes look amazing. So I would disagree that modular is only limited to boring, standard, repetitive, looking buildings. Because now we have the ability to do parametric modeling, we can easily adapt, right, a parametric unit, for example, right, to adjust its shape, its color, its appearance, and so on. Technology allows us to do so. So, of course, it's always easier to do things in an identical, repetitive manner, right? That's a no-brainer. But that shouldn't be the reason why we couldn't adapt modular design and construction to do more interesting buildings and architectural designs.
Okay, thank you, Abdulmajid. I'd like to move on now to Nicholas Reynolds. Nicholas is the construction director at Amana. Now, Amana, for all of those who don't know, is one of the most high-profile projects in the region. It's a luxury tourism resort and destination on the Red Sea, and it's part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 program of giga projects, all aimed at driving tourism into the kingdom. Nicholas, welcome. Thank you very much for your time. So you represent the whole of the client community, the project owners and developers, and we've heard from Naji and Riad, the need to complete designs in advance, and that's putting quite a lot of responsibility on the owners. So what's your view on this sort of transformation in construction? Is it important to you?
Thank you, Richard, and thanks, gents, for joining. It's great to be on the panel. I think as a client representative, and we've got a consultant, we've got software engineers, we've got a manufacturer and a contractor, it's great to be part of that group. We are definitely, as one of the, as you mentioned, giga projects here in the Kingdom, we're very interested and passionate about trying to pursue a better way of construction for our projects. So as you said, we are a luxury destination resort. We are building a new tourism infrastructure for the kingdom. And as part of 2030, we're doing so much more than just building buildings. We are trying to create an infrastructure where we're looking at creating jobs for local Saudi citizens. We're looking at improving manufacturing, local content of local product. There is so much in the kingdom that is changing, and I think our projects, and I speak on behalf of all of the Giga projects, are trying to spearhead a lot of that activity. So we are very excited about participating with offsite manufacturers, and may not necessarily be modular. That's probably the easy answer to the last question, that we are looking at all things offsite that can assist the delivery of our buildings in a very remote location. The Red Sea, Neom, Alulia, Qiddiya is closer to Riad, but a lot of our projects are very remote. There is not an existing workforce. There is not an existing contractor base that we can work with. So everything has to come. We have got very high sustainability and environmental standards that we are trying to meet, and that we will meet, and particularly environmental. Probably the Red Sea more so than us, but they are building on coral islands in a coral archipelago. We have an island as well, surrounded by coral. Everything that we do has to be very carefully thought out, and if we can touch the earth lightly with a lightweight frame and a lightweight structure, and be able to remove it one day in the future, thinking of the full circular economy of where things are heading with zero carbon and all of the other issues that are at play. It's very important that we reach out to the contracting, manufacturing and design and consultant community to say, bring us your ideas, bring us your technologies, and we are open to what it is that you guys can do. So I think so much so, a lot of our projects, as you probably all know, are funded and commenced by the Public Infrastructure Fund here in Saudi, PIF. There is a group, and I have spoken to them. They've given me permission to mention that today we are working that's collectively as a group to encourage offsite and modular construction. There's a bunch of strategies being put in place within the kingdom. And as
Sorry to interrupt, Nicholas, that sounds very interesting. Is that a group within the PIF, or within the operating companies that are under the PIF umbrella?
That's correct. So we've got a working group, if you like, where we're all participating and contributing. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing going on. So, and I think, I'd probably say to the contractor and consultant market out there, as Abdulmajid referred to earlier, we don't want to lose the knowledge base. If someone works out how to get a building on a tropical on an island in the middle of the water surrounded by coral, we'll share that information. So I think
I'm not sure how much you're allowed to talk about here, so I'm going to ask you the questions, and you don't need to answer. But with this group, so you've got a number of construction development companies under PIF. It sounds like the relevant people are coming together to talk about this issue, modular construction. Can we expect some sort of common set of requirements or KPIs or procurement relating to this across all the PIF project companies, or is it not?
I think specifically I can't say, but everything is on the table. So, I think, as everyone's alluded to in the group earlier, everything is changing within our construction market. We know that we can't build the way that we have built in the past. It's not labour efficient. It's not material efficient. It's not carbon efficient. We can get a good product at the end, but at great cost. So. I think there's a learning curve here, and one of the major points I'd like to stress today is that supply chain to us is particularly important. We've all seen, I'm from Australia. I've worked in America. I've worked in China. I've not worked in Europe and the UK, but we all know that the modular activity there is going through the roof at the moment. So there is a lot of big money being invested by various groups into modular and offsite construction. It's slowly happening here, and we want to see that we can help assist that. So, and that's working all the way through from consultants to the clients and up to the government as well, because we also need to talk about permitting and approvals and making sure that the people that are approving these types of buildings understand what it is that we're doing. And some of the ideas that Riad and Naji and his clients are bringing technologically are pretty out there. Everything up to 3D printing and everything in between. So how does that fit into the building code, and how is it going to get stamped by the local authority? So all of those issues are connected. So I think in answer to your question about our group, yes, we are looking at every aspect of streamlining and improving the construction infrastructure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that hot off the press news. If anyone has questions for Nicholas or any of our other panelists, please use the Stages tab on the right-hand side of your screen and send in your questions. Nicholas, if I can just stay on this point that you just mentioned about supply chain capacity. So Saudi Arabia has this huge program of giga projects and other investments as well. We're now talking about delivering construction projects in a new way. As the client, you have to select your contractors and suppliers on the basis that you trust that they can deliver things as you want. So that means, if a contractor comes to you and says, a traditional contractor comes to you and says, yes, I can do it modular, I can do it with a low carbon footprint. What are you looking to see from them that will convince you that they're a safe bet? Because they're promising to act like a manufacturer, but they're not a manufacturer.
That's right. And back to some of the earlier discussion, I think definitely this methods of construction is moving into a manufacturing mindset rather than a construction mindset. The last thing that we want is traditional construction to happen under a roof and then you put it on a truck and bring it to site. That doesn't help anybody. So what we're looking for is, and I think the best solution for us is that we get experienced local contractors, because we are in a difficult environment. We're in a very remote location, hundreds of kilometres from any other major centre. But there are no factories there either. So the manufacturers may be in Europe, they may be in the UAE, they may be in Africa, but there still needs to be an on-site ground-based application of doing that. So I think for us, what we would really encourage is for contractors locally to be partnering with manufacturers internationally, and either bringing stuff in or preferably developing factories and systems and processes here with the help of the government. The Saudi government has been very welcoming through other programs. There's a program under the Ministry of Housing called the Building Technology Stimulus Initiative. They've been very supportive of groups all around the world. So I think the country as a whole, and I think regionally too, Dubai, hear the same from Dubai and other Emirates and Bahrain and Qatar, those sorts of places. Everybody's interested in how we can do this better.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Nicholas. And as I say, if you wish to ask questions to any of our panelists, please send in your questions. We've got about 25 to 30 minutes remaining. Now, we have had a couple of questions coming in. So, Riad, I'm going to put this one to you. You mentioned bathroom pods. So, the questioner has said, why have bathroom pods not taken off here? Now, I'm guessing here means the UAE, but it might mean the region. Why have bathroom pods not taken off here? Off-site construction for a fully fitted bathroom. Some projects use them, but do they cause more issues than they solve? So I don't know, Riad, if you're the right person. But
yeah, I mean, that's exactly why we launched DoPod during Corona last year, in March of last year. Despite of the pandemic, we saw the opportunity in the market, because it's true, there aren't, the market lacks quality providers of bathroom and kitchen pods. And to date, from DoPod, we've serviced clients in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and we've serviced 5-star accommodations, hotel accommodations, and we continue to do so. I think the reason perhaps it hasn't picked up is 3 factors. First is the lack of a quality offering, which we hope we can address through DoPod. Second, it's an awareness by the whole supply or value chain, starting with the general contractors as well as the clients themselves or the buyers, because it does take additional coordination. But providing the bathroom pods and kitchen pods reduces the headache for the general contractor. It actually helps, so it's to their advantage to outsource that, because that's typically where the most of the snags and issues are in a hospitality project or residential project. And so that's the second reason, is the lack of awareness. And the third reason is just getting critical mass, getting it so that so it becomes the de facto way of doing things and not the unusual way of doing things.
Well, thank you. Sorry, Riad, I talked over you. Were you...
That's exactly why we launched 2Pod last year, is because we see the opportunity here.
Well, maybe that was one of your people submitted that question, so to give you a chance to say that. I don't know. I'm just joking when I said that.
Richard, I might jump in there too.
Yeah, sure.
You know, from a client perspective, and bathroom pods are a low-hanging fruit, I suppose, because most people in construction and design industry are now aware of those. We're definitely looking at that for our projects. We know for sure other giga projects are too. There is a very limited supply chain, as Riad has alluded to, and there are 2, now 3 good manufacturers in the UAE. There's one that's recently started here in the KSA, but has not yet ramped up and built significant numbers. There's a lot in Europe, there's a lot in America, but it's too far to bring them. So we're really encouraging that, you know, there is longer term potential here, but supply chain is critical and getting orders. But I think that's an easy win for us, because if there's 12 or 13 trades that are inside a bathroom, tilers, waterproofers, painters, plumbers, electricians, none of those go to the site, that's a big bonus for us. And if those jobs can be created where the people live in the cities, where they can go to work in a factory in a good environment, under roof, work under good conditions, be safe, that's exactly what we want as well. You know, we don't want thousands of people on our construction sites working in the hot sun. You know, that would be easily fixed with something like a bathroom pod.
So we're talking about bathroom pods, but I presume the logic extends to other types of thing. I did a company visit to a press visit, to Finland, and I saw a company that was doing kitchen pods for high-end hotels, you know, when they had the laminar airflows and all the things built in. And I heard about a hospital in Oman that was using surgical operating theatre pods. So I'm guessing that from your point of view, Nicholas, if somebody comes to you with some sort of off-site finished pod concept, it doesn't have to just be bathrooms. You're quite happy to look at it everywhere.
No, I think anything that can assist with what we're putting together. I mean, we are a design-driven project. Atallah is very, very boutique and bespoke in the hotels and the villas and the facilities that we're delivering. But we are also creating our own village there for the permanent staff to live in, for over 10,000 permanent residents. So we're doing not just luxury hotels, we're also doing homes and shops and schools. So and there are some things that will be very well suited, some things that are not. So yeah, we're definitely looking to improve the quality and speed of all of those items.
Now, Naji, if I can just come to you from the sort of the tech company, the software company point of view, you know, we're going through this data transformation generally, and design and everything's going into platforms on the cloud. What opportunities does this offer for a company like your own? You know, Nicholas talked about manufacturers and construction companies coming together. Presumably there's something in it for the tech and the data companies. You know, how do you see that perhaps evolving?
Correct. So you know, as a tech company, we see ourselves as going into providing platforms rather than providing solutions. So any company out there, they would have their niche applications for a tool that they want to use. And what we want to enable people to do, and it's a trend that we see, is that companies build their own applications on top of, you know, the big software titles that everyone uses and everyone has heard of. So it becomes a tool that they fit into that platform and enables them to do more. And it's a trend that we've seen, for example, with configurators. So some contractors, what they've done is actually transition their business model slightly. And this is a departure from the existing models in the industry of having an owner, having a consultant, or a designer, having a contractor. So we've seen cases of contractors actually building these configurators on top of ready-made software. And as a consumer, I go to that configurator and I say, okay, I want this room to be, you know, I want this color for my tiles, and I want this color for my for the walls. And after a period of 6 months, I get a house. So one of those examples has been a company in Amsterdam called Van Wijnen. and technology then enabled them. The big change is putting their data at the center, and I'll go back to something that Abdulmajid said. It's these products that it's these parts that need to be thought of just like an automotive manufacturer. And I'll give an example here across Volkswagen Group. They use the same platform for SUVs that are produced by Lamborghini, by Porsche, by Volkswagen, and by Audi. So as a consumer, I get that same technology, that same backbone of a car at very different price points and very different design diversity. And this is what platforms from tech companies like us will enable people to do.
Okay, thank you.
Richard,
Yes.
can I just mention on that point earlier too, that I wanted to, we talked about mass production of standardized units. But the one good thing about what Naji is talking about is robots don't care what it is they're building. They can build 100 different things. They don't need to build 100 of the same thing. And it may not be a robot, it may be a production system. So a manufacturing mindset can allow that customization at a very small detail. And that's where we're looking to get to, I think, in the end.
Okay, thank you. Now, Abdulmajid, we've talked so far on this panel about the opportunity and the potential and the benefits. It strikes me that, if it's so easy, why aren't we doing it more? And obviously that means there are some barriers and some blockers.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in one of the panels this morning, we're talking about BIM, and a gentleman, Ali from Dubai Municipality, was talking about, he felt that top-down, the government needed to get involved to encourage transformation, whether it's mandating BIM or whatever. What's your view on the role of government? And I don't mean any specific government, just generally, and the role of government in setting standards and licensing and permits and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I need to step a little bit backwards before I can answer this question. It has a lot to do with facilitating or making the process difficult, because at the end of the day, whatever you design, no matter how viable it is, no matter what proof you can offer to demonstrate that it works, at the end of the day, the officer in the civil defense, right, or whichever governmental, right, representative body has a checklist in front of him or her, right? And they have to go through that checklist. And if what you have produced doesn't fit that checklist for whatever reason, they have no choice but to tell you, sorry, we can't do that. So yes, absolutely. There has, the education process has to first and foremost involve the authorities, because otherwise we're working in one bubble, right? And the authorities are in a completely different and isolated one. So yes, that's
if I can just ask on that point.
Sure.
Does there have to be a human element on that checklist? Because that sounds like a classic example of a repeat process where you could automate it.
There has to be, because the issue, unfortunately, and again, I'm on shaky ground here, right? So I have to be very careful with what I say.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
sometimes it's fine. You know what? Maybe the message should be heard. Sometimes you get representatives that are not really trying to look at the solution. As I said, they're just trying to identify boxes to tick.
Yeah,
that is very, very harmful. Even when you're presenting perfectly viable and tickable, let's just say, option. If sometimes there's a little bit of innovation, a little bit of creativity, a little bit of something that is not, out of the 1,000 cases that they receive, right, on a monthly basis, they just flat out reject it because they're not familiar with it. And as I said, the reason is because they're not really looking at the solution. They're just looking at how easy it is for them to tick the box. And if it happens to be an element that is difficult to identify, they just flat out automatically reject it. So this kind of mentality has to change, and the representatives in place has got to be different if you're going to, be able to facilitate innovation, right? One of the biggest obstacles of innovation is having that kind of barrier, right, between viability and acceptability, right, by former bodies.
If I can just skip to Riad. I saw Riad raising his hand just now, so if I can skip to you, Riad.
I just want to confirm what Abdulmajid's saying. I mean, our own experience, we've been in volumetric construction or outside construction since 2009. So initially, our first 4 years, we were like pulling teeth when we were talking to the regulators about the permits. because it's a new technology, it's a new way to put things together. And it was very difficult, and it took a lot of awareness and workshops and so on to really handhold, because it's a risk-taking mechanism. So I absolutely confirm what Abdulmajid is saying. This is our own experience. It has been.
But it seems to me that it must be easier to license something that's built in a factory than something that's built bespoke on site. I can't see why it's more difficult.
It's change management. It's all about change management. It's about changing because it's different. It's different from day to day.
Abdulmajid's coming back in.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying. You need to also take a step backwards, right? Now, how you present it to the authorities makes a huge difference. And this is why we were talking about at the beginning, having consultants, engineers, right? The whole project team, them being aware of how modular construction works so that then they know how to present it in a way where it makes it easier for the authorities to accept. You see, a lot of the times we get resistance from, believe it or not, we go to clients, we make a case for modular design and construction, right? Then we get resistance from architects. Then we get resistance from engineers, right? Then we get resistance from cost consultants because they don't understand the process. And therefore, they don't know how to formulate the documents in a way that makes them compliant with their scopes, right? And then later on with the authority. That being said, I suggest, in addition to this broad education, right, that you need to have from clients to authorities, right, to consultants, contractors, and so on, that also we need to look at the business models, right? Let's just say the project delivery models, right? How you develop and then how you deliver projects. Of course, traditionally you have either a traditional contract where you do the design and then you do the engineering and then you send it over for a contractor to develop the workshops, then you construct it, right? Or you can have the design and build sort of model. But even the design and build model can have a little bit of flexibility. There's always this concern that the contractor is going to overtake, right, the design, and it's going to stifle it, and it's going to make it less exciting and innovative and creative and all of that. Well, okay. Now, if you are an architect, and just like you hire a structural engineer, you hire an MPN engineer, you have a facade engineer, fire and life safety, right, and so on, there is now a room for a modular design and construction specialist. And this modular design and construction can either be an independent consultant or can be a branch of a modular specialist contractor that can offer you a service. It could be paid, it could be for free. I favor if it's a paid service, so that it doesn't look like it's a bait, right, that contractors are throwing you so that you can come back to them, even if this is true. If it's a paid consultancy, then it's more unbiased, let's put it this way, it's more neutral, right? And in that respect, you now have a product that can be built and can be approved by municipality because you have a broader range of specialists, right? And people who know what they're doing, who fed into the design. The issue with most designs, as Riad probably could relate to most, is they do the design in the traditional way, they engineer it in the traditional way, then they think, okay, can we do it modular? They go to a contractor, the contractor has to reverse engineer, right, the whole process, and along that, the architecture will change, the engineering will change, and the whole thing just get shaken up. So
you have to start from a different mindset.
The mindset has to be modular from
I want to come back to Riad on. Sorry to cut you off there. Sure. Riad, before I ask you a question, I can see that somebody in the audience has asked if this is where they submit the questions. Yes is the answer. On the text box at the bottom of the screen, on the right-hand side, you can see start typing. It says that's where you put your question and it will come to us. So if you use that. Riad, so Abdulmajid just said there, these problems about not knowing where to start in terms of checking things off and permits. How have you got around that? You said you had to go through 4 years of kind of training and education. Now, presumably you have some sort of manual or some sort of, you've got a model now. How can we find out more?
Yeah, well, it's for sure it's lessons learned over the years, but the way we went around it is we went to early adopters, like a typical tech startup. You go to an early adopter that's willing to take some of the bugs of the software and work with you because they like that. And our early adopter were companies such as, for example, ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, that has its own engineering department and does its own approvals, for example. So it was interactions with them. So after doing a number of projects with entities that had their own engineering capabilities and approval process within them, then we were able to go to the regulators and authorities and say, listen, it's been done. And just as anecdotally, today there's an activity in the economic in Dubai Economic Department which is called volumetric construction.
Oh.
And we're number one. We had to actually plow through to, and it ended up being an economic activity, but that's, you had to plow through and create something new. So it's actually by finding who are the early adopters that are willing to work with you, and then later on go to the masses.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, Nicholas, we have a question that has come in specifically for you. Do you see a move towards regulating modular construction in terms of contractual engagement, for example, off-site payments? So you might need to explain that a little bit to me.
No, that's fine. And it's come up in every jurisdiction where modular has arrived, in whatever country. And the way I see it and the way we look at it is that a modular delivery is a bit unlike a traditional construction contract. So there is a little bit more of a purchasing agreement about it, and there does need to be advance payments made of a different type for the purchase of the upfront materials that Riad mentioned earlier, how you have to have that material done. There's also payment mechanisms where you need to align your payments with what might be happening in a factory, but it's not necessarily on your site, which is the traditional construction model. You pay for it once it arrives. So that then brings in questions of ownership and, what if the factory closed and you can't get your goods and you've paid for them, and there's a whole bunch of things there, but they have been dealt with in various places around the world. So I think for sure procurement teams and ours, like others, are looking at this differently. So that's a good point.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've got a few more questions, and we've only got 9 minutes left. So one, I think I'll put this to you, Abdulmajid, but I don't know if you're the right person. Why has modular construction for residential projects not taken off in Saudi Arabia? I don't know the background of this question, but is there any thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, Abdulmajid. Riad just raised his hand there, so I'll go to him.
Please, Abdulmajid, I can take it if Abdulmajid is.
That's fine. For all the reasons that we've mentioned elsewhere, right? I mean, these issues that we're facing in Dubai, for example, or in Abu Dhabi, they're very similar to what we're facing in Saudi Arabia, probably to an even larger extent. Another quick point I wanted to make, Richard, to answer also this question. When we talked about, right, as a simple analogy, just for people to understand what we meant about the importance of retention of information, that then will help, the modular design and construction to take off, right? Take, for example, a Lego toy, just to make things very, very simple. We don't want to go into automotive, right? A Lego toy. I was 6 years old when I received my first Lego toy on my 6th birthday, right? It came with something very, very beautiful, and that's called the manual, right? So it shows you how the whole thing is put together. And it was a very, very complex spaceship. I put it together in about 8 hours with a little bit of help from my uncle. Now I'm 45 years old, right? Give me that exact same spaceship. Remove that manual, right, from the toy. Chances are it'll take me 8 days and I still wouldn't be able to construct it, right, as accurately as I did when I was 6 years old. And this is what we're trying to say, the importance of BIM, if it's properly done, and then if it's properly documented into these manuals that show you how the whole thing, right, is put together. We're very good as an industry to communicate the what, but we're terrible at communicating the why and the how. So we have to be able to
talk a lot in digital transformation. We talk a lot about ecosystems. So I'm guessing that guidebooks and standard processes, that's got to be part of the ecosystem, hasn't it?
It's about knowing how to capture and communicate the rationale in a language where non-experts can look at it and understand it, so that then we can take this information and share it again, right, with a wider audience. And therefore, it makes the ability for consultants to understand it, for clients to understand it, and more importantly, those governmental bodies to understand it, right? And therefore, I see the industry then taking off.
Okay. Riad, you were going to make a point in that question about residential projects.
I'll make it very quick, Richard, conscious of time. The main reason I would say is because modular is a manufacturing play. And therefore, for a manufacturing entity to continue, it has to have continuous supply. And so you have to have continuous supply of the projects that will enable manufacturing to continue. I would say that's a main reason for it not taking off yet.
So you need to see the pipeline or the roadmap for volume. Okay, now another question. I'm going to read the question first and see who volunteers to answer. So on a typical hotel project, the owner or the main architect has to involve 24 different consulting firms, or a high number of consulting firms. I've not heard any mention of the importance of the input of all these different professional expertise. So I don't know, this is Naji.
Yeah, so in modular hotel projects, the owner makes the decisions, and the modules tend to be volumetric, like the ones that Riad was talking about. And when they're shipped, they're completely outfitted with everything. So you've got the drawers, you've got the bed, you've got the lamps. So all that input is actually done very, very early in the project. And this is, where Riad was also saying about the importance of making all the decisions early. It tends to be the responsibility of the owner to get that alignment, and then to collaborate with the manufacturer to transmit that information in a timely and right manner. But it's all taken into account very, very early on in the project.
Just whilst you're, Abdulmajid, we've got just a few minutes, if you can quickly make your point.
Yeah, the issue is not getting those consultants involved. They're always going to be involved. We're not talking about replacing them with modular design and construction. The issue is a specialist in modular design and construction as a consultant is not present. This is what we need to bring to the equation. And therefore you have full circle, because he will be able to inform the other consultants how to design in a way where it makes their input fit into modular design and construction process.
Fantastic, thank you. A question for Nicholas. Again, we're running out of time, so keep it short. What are the challenges with planning when using modular construction methods, particularly regarding logistics, due to the remoteness of your project?
Yeah, sure. Logistics is very much on our minds at the moment. As I said, we've got an island, we have a remote destination. So whether we're moving full volumetric modules there, whether we're bringing flat pack systems, whether we're bringing pods, all of that has to be coordinated in a just-in-time type method. So the site works, as Riad said, is underway while the construction of the modules or product is happening. And it just needs to be very carefully planned between how all that comes together. So not much different to a normal traditional construction project, but happens a lot faster. And when the critical paths align, it's a juggling act.
Okay, thank you. Now, Naji, I just want to finish off quickly with you, sort of looking into the future from a technology company point of view. We all know about, we're entering this data economy where data drives everything, and AI. How does that have implications for construction design, and particularly, I guess, modular design using data and sort of live AI to refine designs?
I think it does. So what AI does really, really better than us is capture patterns, right? And I think we will at some point reach a future where if I have a concept designed by an architect, an AI algorithm can tell me what is the least number of modules or pods that I need to fill that design efficiently, be it an AI or a generative design algorithm. And this algorithm will actually propose, you don't need 35 types of rooms in this project. You can get by with only 4. I'm just saying. And that is reducing the number of elements that you need to manufacture, and then the standard set of processes on the standard set of materials makes the project less so a construction project than a manufacturing of 4 types of modules and elements. And obviously, I'm simplifying,
yes.
But it's a trend that I see coming in the future, and actually helping with the design diversity and not removing architects from the equation.
Well, maybe we can revisit that in the next edition of the MENA Smart Construction Virtual Summit. That brings us perfectly to the conclusion of our 1 hour. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. It's been a brilliant discussion, a brilliant panel. Thank you to you in the audience for your questions. I hope we got all of your questions answered. If we've missed out any, I'll circulate the spreadsheet of questions to the panelists afterwards. We've talked a lot about Saudi Arabia over the past hour. And I want to tell you about the next session of the Smart Construction Virtual Summit is a panel focused on Saudi Arabia. And so if you go to stage 3, so using the the stages icon that's on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see it's a little camera icon. If you go onto the stages icon and select stage 3, that will take you to the next session, which is focus on Saudi Arabia, and it's an excellent panel. MEED's Deputy Editor Colin Foreman will be moderating, and it's looking at Amana as well as other giga projects from Saudi Arabia's program. So you really have to go to that one next. But thank you all for your time today, and good luck going forward. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.